Bias and preference. Bias and preference are BNP as an entry. Hi guys, I'm Rick if you don't know that, and welcome to Your Seat at the Table, the mobile edition. We're sitting out here in my work truck. I just did a place called Super Quick, just across the street here. I only had 3 jobs this morning. I'm done for the day. I got to go take the truck back and empty it. Got a little possibly a little paperwork in the office, although I can put that off so I have even more stuff to do tomorrow. The wife's got a doctor's appointment. That's not what you're here for, right? You're here for other crap. Bias and preference. Okay, so like I've said before, I got some stuff from a challenge from a member of the RPG Techniques Consortium. It is a Facebook group of some pretty moderately prestigious people as far as I'm concerned. Some very well-educated people, and definitely well-educated when it comes to the gaming hobby as a whole. And one of the members is a fellow named KC Lee, and I believe he's out of South Korea. Don't quote me on that. But so I printed out his challenge here, and we're going to walk through this a little bit. And gotta have my glasses. So I'll read to you, and then I'll blather my own stuff. So Casey did a small exercise after getting reconnected with his gaming group scene back in his hometown. Got some interesting replies, but I wanted to hear from the group as a small extension of the exercise. Read the statements, i.e. the original statements will be modified for grammar and readability. So this is the original. This is not the statements anyway. It's his first firing. Below about what they enjoy about RPGs, and with your BNP hats on or your bias and preference on, tell me which ones you would find enjoyable to play with and which you would avoid entirely. Bonus points if you can say why for your BNP. So we're going to skip number 1 for a minute, because I want to cycle back to number 1. Number 1, KC, in my opinion, is the whole point and reason of role-playing at the table, in my opinion. That, your example number 1, is a kicker session. Awesome session. And everybody had fun. And I would be surprised if somebody said, well, I didn't really like it. Anyway, so we'll go on to point number 2. I would like to see how my character changes, grows, or dies through the game, with wider freedom to choose their unique answers to questions and paths that aren't usually given in a linear game. Must be a headache for the DM. If I am able to play a game in the future, I would play a narcissist, because that is the only time where it is good to have bad drama. Okay. As a player, when I was a player, and when I play, I definitely want to see my character evolve and progress and improve on several levels. I want to see it mechanically speaking, obviously walking yourself up the skill tree and the experience ladder, or whatever is appropriate for the system you're using, but also as a character. The character should become more developed, deeper, richer, more thought-provoking. You want your characters to come alive. You want to see these characters have life. I want to see them have life. That way, when they die or when something goes south, it hurts even more, because it's more personal. We become invested in the characters at the table, just as we are invested in the table itself, in the campaign or the setting, the sessions, whatever. So there's parts on that. So since there, I would like to see how my character changes, grows, or dies through the game. There are players who never dial into that. You have to accept that as a game master, that there are going to be people at your table, assuming you're an open table, that you're welcome just about anybody that sits down. And there's a lot of people that become very snobbish and elitist. That's their choice and they're right. I just have a problem with it when they want that to be everybody's choice. They want to basically, it's my way or F you. I just recently had some of that on a previous entry on one of my videos. They couldn't pile on fast enough because somehow they felt I was referring to them specifically, and they felt that, I don't know, was I? Does that matter? Apparently matters to them, since theirs is the only way to play. The rest of us are morons and fools. Well, but they'll tell you that they don't agree with that, and yet they turn around and constantly make the snidey comments that say otherwise. I got ears, friends. I got eyes. I can read and hear what you're saying. Just putting that out there, my friends. So, number 3, tabletop role-playing games just allow me to live it. other mode of gaming is different, and I still play them, i.e. PCs, board games, etc. Yeah, that's the one standout. The one huge standout in my eyes, in my opinion, the huge difference between a role-playing game, regardless if that's a proper term or not. I'm like a lot of others. I don't care what it's called. It's just what we've been calling it for 40 effing years, 40, 50 years. For 50 plus years is what it's been called. I didn't come up with the terminology. It's not exactly a role-playing game, but it can be. The ultimate goal is to have as much fun as you can, but your goals and my goals may not always jive, right? So, I have played gobs of video games. Plenty of my share. Now, although I will grant you, some of you play far more than I ever did, because I've never owned an Atari, a Nintendo, or any of these other things, Xbox, whatever. I've never owned any of those. Too expensive. Couldn't justify it. The computer was my big thing. So if I could play it on the computer, then I did. I still do. I mean, I play Dwarf Fortress on a regular basis. I spent 4 hours last night just kind of droned out on it. Just kind of buzzed out on it a little bit. So that's part of the thing, though. Video games are very predictable. Yeah, there's a lot of chaos factor, and yes, there's a lot of alternate options that are baked into the game by design. But at the end of the day, if you play that game enough times, what happens? There's no growth to it. There's no other changes. So no matter how elaborate until current standards of technology, who knows in 20 years what they'll be able to do. But current video games, they're fun, but they're mindless. There's no investment. You just don't become invested in those characters that are on those video games. I have never gotten invested in them like I have at characters at a table with living, breathing people. And I've seen, as a game master, as a dungeon master, that's true too. I have had lots of NPC characters that I have grown and developed over the years through sessions, and was visibly hurt when they died, because I'd spent so much time with them, so much time working on them, and so much effort in developing them. Just my thoughts on that, Casey. So we'll work on to number 4. Number 4, interactions between players. Multiplayer online nowadays is either non-existent or too toxic. This goes hand in hand with question number 3 about video games. Through the 90s, specifically the early to mid 90s and the very late 80s, I had American Online in the 80s, and I had CompuServe first. It was horribly expensive. Then I went to American Online, which was still horribly expensive. I was paying $2 an hour to play anything, to use American Online. It was $2 an hour, and then they went flat rate. I want to say 93-ish. They went flat rate. It was the same month I broke my knee, was laid off work for like 6 months because of this need for a knee surgery and recovery and a few other things. So I was just stoked because you had unlimited gaming, unlimited access to the internet. I OD'd on it. My wife had to beat on me after 3 days, and I hadn't showered 3 days. She wasn't having any more of it. She had to get up, go do something. So I played a lot of, and there's various different terms. MMOs is the one I'm most familiar with, but there's MMM, OPG, there's an alphabet soup full of these damn things. Massive multiplayer online games, right? And there's still a slew of them. You all play many of them out there. Lots of them available. At the time, the ones I was playing was text-based. And there's a lot of people don't like text-based, but I'm a big fan of it. Really a big fan of text-based stuff, especially with the play-by-post. There's so many things you can do in play-by-post you cannot do at a table, and that's the God's truth. You don't have to like it. If you've never done it, you don't know what I'm talking about. It's your loss, not mine. So I played, the first game I played was a game called Federation. It was owned and designed and coded by some fella out of Britain. And it was not a very big game, and it was not a very complicated game. And that led me to another game called Gemstone 3, which was on American Online at the time, and then there was one that was owned by the same company. At the time, they were called Centronics, I believe, Simtronics, as an SIM, out of St. Louis or someplace like that. So they had one called Modus Operandi. So in Modus Operandi, you was this kind of like a Caribbean island vibe, and with gangsters running all over the place, and a lot of your bad guys were thugs and other things like this, and so it was just another grind to keep getting this stuff, the loot, the money, to raise your character so you can do this, that, and the other thing. But there's a lot you could do, don't get me wrong. And I played it for 3-4 years. And then I also, like I said, Gemstone 3, that one there is a a fantasy setting, not unlike D&D. And once again, it's a text-based game, and I played the crap out of it. And you could have some pretty good culture. There was a lot of people who really got into their roles and made the things come alive and seem that. But there was always, for every one of those, there were 3 people that were either just in it for the fun, or in it just to play, or to be an ass. We called them snerts back then, SNERT, snert, and you were snerting people, just like we used to call snogging, what they call British call kissing, right? So anyhow, I did that for 5 or 6 years, and Casey's correct. Like I said, for every one of us serious players on those online games, you're going to have 3 or 4 that are not serious, and that odd individual who just gets their rocks off doing anything and everything they can to cheese off everybody else. And you know what I'm talking about, right? So there's an element at the table, at the role-playing game table, on the pen and paper side, that you cannot replicate, cannot duplicate visually with a video program, with a video game, regardless of what style, at least at this point. Who's to say what this AI will bring us, and like I said, in 10 years, 20 years. But currently right now, you have less control when you go online. You are just a member in a big sandbox. And some people want to play by the rules, and some people want to blow the rules out of the water, and some people just want to screw with everybody just because they can until they get thrown out. Right? So, yeah. Move on to number 5. I aim for consequences and repercussions of my actions to make an impact in that fictional world, that it matters, good or bad. Well, Casey, I agree. That is the main basis in my bias and preference mindset when it comes to gaming in general. The whole concept of role play, in a nutshell, is to have your characters engaging meaningful stuff that they're in their fictional life, whether it's good or bad, to have impact on that world, that virtual world, and more importantly, for the player behind the character to feel some kind of personal satisfaction that they've accomplished something that they would not have accomplished in the real world. So many people play fantasy game systems, regardless if they're science or whatever. You name your favorite genre, there's a system for it. You name your favorite hobby, and there's probably a system for it. I mean, it's like anime. There's always an anime for everybody. It's just kind of the way that works, especially nowadays. With the advent of Kickstarter and the social internet, where everybody can just pretty much throw out everything they want. You couldn't do that 25 years ago. So you had a lot more limitations. So yeah, when we look at that point, I aim for consequences and repercussions of my actions to make an impact in that fictional world, that it matters, good or bad. As a game master, that is a corner pillar of my whole philosophy on the game table in the first place, is that there ought to be consequences and repercussions. Fair ones, but they don't always have to be that fair. They can be a surprise, usually, mostly out of consequence, because the characters chose to do this instead of that. Or the characters chose to attack instead of negotiate. Or, it goes with it. It just kind of goes with it. So we go with number 6. As a DM, my favorite thing is seeing players invested in the game world and enjoying it. Players discussing the story, actively listening during play, trying to guess what's going on, and actively helping organize things really, really makes me feel that the time and prep was worth it. All right, so this is a two-parter, so we'll start on there. Question 6.1, or question 6, subsection A, right? As an apple. As a DM, my favorite thing is seeing the players invest in the game world and enjoying it. Well, if you didn't, you wouldn't want to be a dungeon master, would you, Casey? Would you really want to be a dungeon master if you weren't in it to see that investment and that engagement and the expressions of everybody at the table? If your table is having fun, if they're having fun and they're discussing options and planning strategy and thinking things through verbally and sharing this and that at the table, which at the end of the day, when we talk about the 4 dimensions of play, and hey, Crispy, you didn't own the term 4 seasons, 4 dimensions. You might have come into that idea, but the fact is, this has been part of the damn system since Gygax. You don't have to like it either. You ain't original. You can own it all you want. Good for you. And it works for you, great for your table. Awesome. You want to purposely segregate people so you get this specific concept nailed down through effort, time, and work. But isn't that what everybody does anyway when it comes to role-playing at the game table? When we talk about the game table. Once again, we use this term role-play pretty damn loosely, don't we? Right? I have had loads of pleasant hours having spirited debates over, should we do this? Can we do that? Does the rules encourage us or allow this? Well, we could just do a house rule. Well, sure, but part of getting there is half the fun. This is kind of the whole point of having a plethora of these damn books. And so we have stuff to share and stuff to have discussions about, and keeping in mind, unless you're playing a very thin system, and they exist, game systems like D&D that literally have stacked taller than this truck does, if I took all the books I own, stacked them up, they would go above the hood of the truck. This is what it is, man. Whole point of having that stuff was to have stuff to engage in. But more importantly, because there's such a volume of stuff, there becomes points and times when you need to stop, pause the in-character action to confer about something in those books. This becomes even more imperative when you start playing at prestige level and at epic level, in my opinion. Remember, this is my opinion, my bias and preferences. Not yours, and not Crispy's and his associate group of people who want to just rail on people for fun. I don't get it. I'm not welcome to have my opinion, but I'm not going to ban them or kick them off the channel either. You got a right to say what you want. You're right to your opinion, including on my channel. I don't have to like your opinion, and I'll tell you if I don't like it, but I'll still keep it posted because I'm this weird that way. So, question 6. Sub-question B. As a player, my favorite part is the experience of character freedom and choices, especially in being allowed to avoid cliché stupidity purely for the sake of plot, and the consistency of the game world's response to the party's needs and achievement, i.e. the town guards will not arrest you for theft after they saw your party slay the world-ending Dark Titan, right? Not sure about the narcissistic character, but I actually enjoy hearing unique answers from players. One of the more memorable ones was being told by a player that his halfling will take shelter from a volcanic eruption by crawling into the open corpse of the riding horse that had been cut in half by an ant hag. I have a reflection on it. Yeah, it goes in. Right. So, yeah. That's the brilliance and the fun of the moment. In part, this is why I chose to read number 1 last, because it's at the end of the day, it's the heart and soul of this whole exercise, as far as I'm concerned, Casey, and it is what it is. The fact that your player was clever and creative enough to see a scenario that's going to be bad and find some way to mitigate that potential damage. The volcano's going to explode. I'm crawling into the guts of the horse over here to hide, because there's no other convenient place to hide. So what they're doing is taking cover from the crap flying out of the air. The lava comes, the horse corpse ain't going to help you at all. But the thought process, things like that. When I have players at the table who spontaneity come out with something like that, I give them extra experience at playing D&D. That is a bona fide way of gaining an extra 1K, an extra 1,000 experience points out of me. Because by that time you're in 10th or 12th level or higher. What's 1,000? But for creative use of your in-game bias and preferences. Right? Yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. So let's bring us back to question number 1. Right? I like this one. This is what got me really kind of stoked for the idea of this challenge, if you will. Right? So as a DM or player, when someone does something so hilariously impossible and it works. Example was DMing a game with a bard with crazy high charisma. I forget the level, but had them set up to fight a succubus. Well, this player with a bard managed to out-seduce the succubus, skips the whole boss fight, and managed to have her basically fall in love with him, or in his words, I have a pet succubus, now deal with it. The second example would be I had a drunken dwarf player insisted on carrying a barrel of strong alcohol with him everywhere he went. Had to have them fight a young green dragon. Well, they were supposed to run away, is what I wanted to do anyway. This other player was a barbarian with pretty good strength. Well, the dwarf puts a wick in the booze barrel, and has him throw him and the barrel at the dragon's head. He insisted he couldn't be parted with the booze. After some crazy rolls, I'm stuck DMing a mid-level, lower-level party that just blew up a dragon's head with a dwarf missile and are now way too wealthy. I got back at them, though, after they bought up the town and became real, shit lordly, and had an orc goblin army wipe out the town. I would have let them keep all of it, but they abused my kobold housekeeper NPC, and so they deserved it. Hey, Casey, I love it. I love kobolds. I use them a lot. And I use them, and that idea of a kobold, having a kobold housekeeper, you're putting them in roles that are unusual. Hey, GMs, you want to be a GM? Find creative places to use non-standard stuff. So if you look at your kobolds, well, this is what they're for. Find other ways to utilize them. Creative and colorful ways. I had a player who hated goblins, but he had a strict moral code of his own. He didn't mistreat things and people and stuff out of a principle. And this was the man's principle, not his character. So I tapped into that. So the group goes after. I forget exactly what the deal was, but they hear a commotion and they get drawn to what is basically a pack of wolves. I think they're dire wolves, and they're going after something up in a tree. Well, the group drives up, kills half the dire wolves and drives the other half off. So the NPC stuck up in the tree comes down, and it's a goblin. And of course, our barbarian friend immediately wants to rip its head off and kick it down the hill. The goblin starts speaking like an English butler, and he's all shabby looking, but he's dressed up like he's an English butler. He's like some rich guy's major domo or something. And he's cultured, and he's a pacifist, and he's utterly terrified he's going to die. And he doesn't understand. He was faithfully serving his master when something went wrong, and his master banished him to this godforsaken place with these horrible dog things trying to kill me and trying to eat me. And you came and saved my life. And so this put a check in my would-be aggressive barbarian friend who wanted to rip the goblin's head off and kick it down the hill. Morally speaking, he couldn't bring himself to do it no more. He just said, fine, we saved you from the wolves. You go on your way, and we go on our way. And so the party starts to march away, and our barbarian friend turns back to make sure the goblin's standing back there. And so the goblin's standing there with this terrified look on his face, and he's just looking around, and he's, he's lost. He's absolutely out of his element. He doesn't know what to do. He just waits to die. He looks so pathetic. I made him look so pathetic that a couple of the other members of the party were like, "Oh, please, it's a bloody goblin." And the barbarian guy, the player guy, he's staring at me. He says, like, he knows, or he suspects that that's kind of what I did, was tap into that thing of his that he really, really liked to throw around. So I'm using it against him. And so he's like, "Fine, you come here. Keep your mouth shut. Stay out of the way." And tells the rest of the group, first safe place he stays. We leave him at the first safe place. So the first place they go, this quote safe, was this other barbarian village out in the sticks. And they get there and they start to walk up, and the barbarians, I talk to them, I make we'll have a good night, we'll all share with me, it'll be a good evening, good place to start. He goes up there, and then he gets into a shouting match, an arguing match with the tribal leader guy, because the tribal leader guy keeps pointing at the goblin, and it's clear that the tribe wants to turn him into the evening's entertainment by torturing and killing the goblin, which not that long ago our barbarian friend would have been on board with. He wanted to do that very thing. Well, he just wanted to kill it outright, but, So he becomes concerned that the goblin can't survive at this village, that these people are going to kill him the minute they turn their back on him, because they were they were respecting the player characters, mostly because the barbarian had a little bit of reputation and because he knew the right stuff and said the right things. But it goes against everything that they've ever, considered to be normal, to not kill the damn goblin. In a different session, an unrelated session. And like I said, I did a video on it. It's two dwarves and a wagon. It was a campaign for 2 players that basically ran for 9 months, almost a year, if I remember right. It ran for a while. And the player characters are first level dwarves, get their job. They get a job as teamsters, driving a wagon load of supplies from the main mountain home to various outposts in a circuit. And the idea was that they would make this circuit for as many times as the game lasted, because that was the part of the deal, to keep revisiting same places or similar places and new places too, but to have a familiar theme to it. And one of the first things they did, one of the players cheeses off another group of NPC teamsters. So they're in competition for jobs too. So they have to, they're hired by a guy who provides the wagon and the mules, finds the cargoes. But if you really want to make money as a teamster, you find alternate cargoes, stuff you can, luxury items, things that you can bring and sell, and sometimes things that may not be considered accepted, whatever works. So they cheese off this other team. So right off the bat, here becomes their nemesis through the whole campaign. Now the catch-22 is I didn't have the opposing team screw with them every chance they got. That would make sense. So 4 or 5 days into the game, for example, they're at a mountain. They're in a mountain hold, going through a pass. The weather shuts it down because of snow. There's a small village there with an inn, so the dwarves are, their wagons outside covered in tarp, and the mules are inside a stable, and they're at the tavern, and lo and behold, they walk in they drive up through the snow, and they start unloading, unhooking the mules and stuff like this, and they discover that there are several other teamster teams present. There's like 5 of them, so there's 4 other sets of NPC teamsters, including the people they pissed off on day 1. So during the evening, one of the two teamsters that they cheesed off, because they immediately started having some sour words, because they started making some snide comments and crap about the youngsters over there don't know their don't know they're not smart enough not to wipe their backs with their beards, right, kind of stuff. One of them casually, kind of not maybe too casually, ambles out the door into the snowstorm, with a couple oddball looks across the room at the at our players, at our PCs. So one of the player characters, Kenny, who was playing at the time, gets suspicious of this. Oh, I'm going to go outside and check on our wagon. And then gets out there and finds this other dwarven teamster hanging around, loitering around their wagon. So Kenny drives it, challenges him, of course, and of course it's just all, I don't know what you're talking about. I was just out here, just getting some fresh air, right? Okay. So they spend half the night going over the wagon looking for a flaw or sabotage, something, right? Something. And Kenny's utterly convinced that these people sabotaged the wagon. I never said they did. I never give an indication it did. It came out, Kenny's character has a healthy dose of paranoia, took it upon himself to assume this. So he tells this to his partner, and Osborne, he's a young fellow with a lot of issues. He decides to go out and return the favor. So he doesn't mess with just the other guy's wagon. He messes with everybody's wagons in some way or another. And so I have him role play this all out. And he's successful. They're successful in sabotaging various things. Nothing catastrophic, just things that will force the other guys to slow down and maybe not get as good a deals on some of the stuff, the extra stuff that everybody tends to bring around, along with the large bulk good items that they're actually paid to haul around. See, it's the same concept. So while they were tricking out that wagon, Osborne just obsessed with firearms. And he says, why can't I get a blunderbuss and mount it on the wagon? I'll get a pole. We'll put it on a pole. We'll mount it. We'll put a swivel thing on it, And I said, so a crude swivel gun on your wagon. Why not? Is that within the rules of D&D? Actually, it is. It is in the rules of D&D. And it's the same concept where they got the crank-handled multi-fired crossbow, because later in the campaign they mounted one of those on the damn wagon too. So now they had two pintle mounts on each side of the wagon, so they could take turns shooting crap. The blunderbuss took too long to reload. That they weren't happy with that. But I says the rules. That's what the rules say, and it makes sense to me. But yeah, you can have these things. Just know that if you roll a 1, there's a we'll roll to see. If you roll one run, you hit another one, the thing explodes. And then you deal with the damage. Right? But they were happy with it. And Osborne never ceased to amaze me in some of the creative things that they would do in character at the table throughout that campaign. It was on a daily basis. There were many sessions where the lion's share of it didn't involve combat at all, but there was troubleshooting, problem solving, and lots of role play. Very deep, meaningful role play. That, my friends, is theater of the mind, in my experience. Without a whole lot of coaching and a whole lot of intentional, purposely staging a table so everybody has to conform to a very stringent set of rules or they can't play. And that's where I have a bitch with a lot of people when it comes to stuff. But that's my preference. Though some people out there, and I won't refer to their names anymore because they've taken upon themselves to assume that, whatever it is they want to own it. Well, that's on them. But they're not the only ones out there with this concept, this idea. Internet's full of them. You just got to look and listen. All of it. Like I said, I've been a big fan of full immersion my whole life. I go back, no offense to some of these younger, newer folks, y'all don't know your ass from your heads. You don't. You weren't there. I was. I know how we experienced play. And there was absolutely nothing wrong with the way we played it. Just like I say, there's nothing wrong with the way you choose to play your game. If your people sitting at your table are on board with you, then what's the problem? Now, if you purposefully, exclusively decide there's only certain type of people for certain capabilities are ever going to sit at your table, good for you. I hope you can sustain that. Tables are not for forever. If you have a table that lasts more than a couple of years, the same people, you're doing real well. If you're one of these very rare people who have the same group of players that you've been playing with for decades, man, you've got the dream everybody else would like. Most of us would love to have, whether we admit it or not. Just so you know, all right? It's just the endless stories. As a DM, when someone does something so hilariously impossible, it works. In a nutshell, that's the whole point of the game, in my mind, the whole the accumulation of everything working well and everything going right. That's the whole point. When your players are so invested at the table that they're going to go so deep into character that they wear it like a coat without being prompted to do so. Without all agreeing ahead of time, we won't talk about this or this or this or this at the table. But what the hell do I know, right? Great exercise, Casey. This thing ran a little bit longer than I wanted to. I get home later this afternoon after my wife's doctor's appointment. I'm going to go ahead and post this on the internet. We'll see what kind of comments I get for this one, too. But you know what? You still commented on my stuff, didn't you? You still watched it. It's still got in your head. It's still rolling around in the back of that head of yours, too. Because that's how shit works.